You are all members of the same race, the human race.
I need to get this fact into your skulls as black people. That is not every white man or white woman that hate black people, nor brown man or brown woman that hate black people. No, and oftentimes you've heard me say that white people are racist. Why my proposition is predicated on that is simply that I believe that most of you have the faculty to look through and be able to sift through what I'm saying and arrive to the point to understand that the large percentage of white people and brown people are the ones practicing racism. And among those large percentage, you have those people who occupy the dominant hierarchies, and they are the ones who determine how the world are being governed. If you look at education, look at religion, you look at government, entertainment, and sports, they are the ones who occupy the dominant hierarchy. And that's when I use the word white people are racist. That means that my word could be likened to what I call a fallacy of generalization in philosophy. The fact is that there are so many white women, white men, brown women that love black people that even some black people don't love themselves that way. So there is a video that I'm about to play for you right now. Our beautiful, awesome white mother called Jane Elliott. She's trying to explain to white people about their race, because so many white people have been mistaught, mistrained to view black people as separate from themselves. And if you know who I am, I don't believe in those shit. You see, if you look at, in the 17th centuries, in 18th centuries, and even in the 19th and the 20th century, you find out that some philosophers and some scientists have come up with the idea of what they call the polygenesis. What does that mean? They state that every race have their own ancestors emanated from wherever they are living. You see that white people came from Europe, and then brown people came from Asia, and black people came from Africa. So no one of them ever wanted to accept the fact that every human race came from Africa, up until the 20th century, when we start having our own scientists who could look into that nonsense. And they begin to devise a strategy to measure how do we ascertain the fact that every human being came from Africa, or we came from different places. Using carbon dating and DNA tests on some of the ancient mummies and several other excavations, they were able to find out that every human race came from Africa. And you can't deny that fact anymore. And that's what Jane Elliott is trying to teach white people. An average black person doesn't know that a white person came from Africa, which we call the Neanderthals. They left Africa over 200,000 years ago. It was the ecology of their system that changed their skin. They were blacks. Don't delude yourself on that. We all human beings came from the same place. But why we are trying to get this straight into the psyche of white people is to understand that they are not better than us. And that's why in our school, you could go to university and nobody's going to teach you about what black people did. They are going to teach you about what white people did. If you go to philosophy, they tell you about who is the father of philosophy. They tell you Socrates. They're never going to tell you that there's a black intellectual called Dwarf who was the first philosopher. If you ask who is the father of medicine, they're going to tell you it's Epicurus. They're never going to tell you that it was a man called Imhotep in Egypt. So these things has been misconstrued. And because our professors and our lecturers in Africa don't even know any better to teach their people, they keep selling shit to their children. And our people are being tensed with a lot of stupid knowledge that they do not really know who they really are. So when you understand these things, it will be easier for you to see the world in its totality, that every human race is the same. Forget about what white people are doing, forget about what brown people are doing in the meantime. It is black people who still retain the capacity to love and still retain the capacity to unite humanity. But if black people begin to govern themselves well, these things cannot happen. The reason why they treat black people anyhow in America, France, Japan, Australia, England, Singapore is because black people are treating their own people bad in Africa. The day we stop treating our own people bad and start valuing our own people, there is no way any person in America is going to treat any black person bad. It's not possible. So people will always treat you based on how you show yourself out there. Anyways, I want you to listen to Jane Elliott, and she have made a lot of sense, and I like the way she used education to explain what she's actually talking about. Listen to her.
You are all members of the same race, the human race, which started with black women between 300,000. Don't interrupt me, I don't have much time. Now, white folks, you don't like it, but all you are is faded blacks. every one of you, if you trace your DNA back far enough, you're going to find that some of your DNA came from Africa, because we all have the same ancestor back there, every single one of us. And those of you who think you don't have are obviously from outer space. Now, that means that every one of us is a 30th to 50th cousin to every other person in this room. Well, every person in this room who considers himself or herself a biracial person, stand. Don't you stand. Don't you stand. People, we have to get rid of the language of racism. I'm not a teacher. Teachers dispense facts and figures so that they can get their kids ready for the end of school testing. I've been called a trainer. You train dogs and horses and members of the military. I don't train people. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root duck deuce, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. In this country, we spend a lot of money on what we call education. It isn't education, it's indoctrination.